and my myriad of friends in the Twin Cities area, and obviously the Twins coming to town this week, and I thought I'd throw a little curveball out. This guy actually covers the National Football League for ESPN out in the Twin Cities. I see him at the Super Bowl. I see him at owners' meetings and combines and whatnot. Nobody covering the Minnesota Vikings better than this guy, and of course the Ravens going to go up to Minnesota and play this year, and if they do it right, they'll be there for 10 days like I'm going to be stuck up there freezing my buns off next year for Super Bowl 52. We welcome Kevin Seifert back onto the program, one of our defending champions, and a guy I've been knowing for a couple of decades, covering Oriole baseball with the Washington Times 2 decades. Has it been 2 decades ago, Kevin Seifert? It's crazy,
Gosh,
right?
I think my last year was 1999, so I guess technically that was 2 decades ago.
Wow. Man, Virginia still hadn't won anything, right?
No, the basketball's a little better than when I during the interim there, but football's struggling right now.
You don't ever let that Who thing get away, do you? Right? I mean, you're not really allowed to be a football fan per se when you're covering a league, but you can always have your college team. That's always that's where the smack talk comes, right?
Yeah, and I actually enjoy college sports. You know, watching it and cheering for it probably more than pro sports as a result of what I've the teams that I've covered and not covered, and so that has always been a fun part for me, and kind of lets me slip back into the college years and remember what it's like to be a fan. Which, in half seriousness, it's very important to remember what that feels like when you're writing for them.
Well, did you like my little come on to Mike Zimmer at the breakfast at the owners' meetings? I decided it's NFC breakfast, so I don't really have any work. So I decided to sit at Zimmer's table, and Zimmer came up with a plate of eggs and bacon and whatever, and he sat down. I said, look, I could have sat anywhere in here. You better make this good. This better be the best thing. So for me, with the Vikings offseason, some thoughts about where the Vikings are and where your division is, and certainly the draft now. We start to get a real color of the offseason now, right, with where teams are going, where they expect to be. Boy, the Vikings have had their hands full with the Bridgewater injury. I mean, I don't wish that on any organization.
No. I mean, that, you go back to last summer, and they really thought they had something going. They had gone to the playoffs in year 2 of Zimmer's time there. Their defense had really improved. Bridgewater appeared to be a quarterback that was coming into his own and developing into a guy that could be their starter for a long time. They make a few offseason moves to get better. They come back in year 3 of Zimmer and Bridgewater, and preseason looks great. Training camp looks great. Adrian Peterson is healthy. Teddy Bridgewater is ready to take the next step. And then on a random day in August, he takes a bad step and dislocates his knee in an injury that's so terrible that no one knows if he'll ever play again. And so suddenly they're dealing with the shockwaves of that, both emotionally and on the field. Nobody really plans to lose their franchise quarterback at any point, let alone a week or 2 before the season with a good backup in Sean Hill, but not somebody you would want to start 16 games for you necessarily. And so they started having to wheel and deal just to get themselves in moderate competition, and that's why they ended up getting Sam Bradford. And a lot's changed since then. Adrian Peterson has now moved on after another injury-plagued year, and they're really a team that doesn't necessarily have a personality anymore. Sam Bradford is a quarterback that is very efficient, but no one knows if he's the kind of guy that can take you to a Super Bowl or not. There's really not a whole lot of superstars on this team. Mike Zimmer has had his own health problems that have sort of clouded the usual intensity that he goes about doing things with, and so there's suddenly a lot of more question marks about this team in the short term and the long term. And you look at this division, and as well as the Packers played last year at the end of the regular season and into the playoffs, and as long as they have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, they're going to be a very difficult team to beat year in and year out. And so that is always going to be as long as Aaron Rodgers is there, that's always going to be what the Vikings are chasing. And I think Detroit had a decent season last year as well, so that's another team that you could say is a playoff contender and a team that the Vikings would have to compete against. So it's a tough division, and I think the best way to describe the Vikings is they're a team in transition and an uncertain short and long-term future.
Well, you talk about Bridgewater, and you say something that's kind of chilling, right? Like, nobody knows if he'll ever play again.
Yeah.
Where are they with that, or even is anyone privy to what that is? I mean, I remember the day he went down, and I mean, obviously you're out there reporting on it off of Twitter, and the things that the teammates were saying and the kinds of emotion was like a plane crash kind of thing. I mean, it really was frightening.
Yeah, and part of that was because everyone likes Teddy Bridgewater so much. He's such a good guy, such a down-to-earth person, not at all flashy, not at all the kind of teammate that makes people upset. You know, everyone wants to play with him and for him, and so that was part of it. But also just how gnarly the injury was, frankly. I mean, his leg was flopping around in ways that it's not supposed to, and so we get out there that day, and Mike Zimmer is breaking down in tears. You know, big, tough defensive coach, breaking down in tears. He references two people, his wife and his father, who have both recently passed away. You know, total funeral atmosphere. You know, Rick Spielman, the GM, is sitting there on the steps listening to the press conference, and his head is kind of in his hands. And you realize this is really, you know, they're not coming out and saying it. They're saying all the right things, but you realize, you read the tea leaves and you see the emotion, and you know this is a franchise-altering day. And never at any time have they ever said or even tried to come close to a timetable for when he might be able to get back. And he's a very private person, so no one has talked to him, at least on the record. No one. We've seen a few videotapes that he's put on, or a few tapes that he's put on Twitter that shows that he's walking around and all that. But there's a big difference between that and being able to play football. And if you just watch the way the team is operated, you know, the day after the season they named Sam Bradford the starter for 2017, and then in free agency they signed Case Keenum to be the backup. So if they had any thought that Teddy would be ready when training camp starts or when the season started, they may or may not have gone to those lengths. And so just in reading the tea leaves, it's very clear that the injury was very serious, not one that has a clear path back onto the field. No one has ruled it out. They haven't released him. They haven't said he's done, nothing like that. But we haven't seen any evidence that there's any movement or momentum towards him getting back on the field. And so that's kind of where you are. Maybe it takes 2 years and then he's fine. I don't know. But we're now coming up on 10 months or 9 to 10 months after the injury, and not only is he not ready to play, obviously, but we don't even have a timetable for when he might be.
Kevin Seifert's been my friend for a couple of decades from his days back at the Washington Times. He's been out in Minnesota for about 2 decades now, covering the Vikings as well as anyone. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Seifert, that's Seifert, just like George. I remember the George Seifert commercial. I got to blame it on the Bossa Nova. I got to do that. Seifert ESPN out on Twitter. You know, you mentioned Zimmer and the eye thing. And I saw him out at the owners' meetings. Boy, there was a story this week, right? I mean, he has really had this incredible. Like, my wife's had issues with her eyes after cancer, and I think we all take our eyes for granted. It's a crazy thing. We all have them until you don't. And you know, my wife battled for 8 months last year after her cancer with dry eye and a scratched cornea and retina issues, and you know, all of that goes into that. And until you're around it, and a guy trying to coach, I mean, this is a serious thing going on with Zimmer right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's fighting off blindness in that eye, frankly. You know, and it was a total fluke thing that he even found out what was going on. He had some vision problems, but, you know, these guys have blood pressure problems. They have, you know, they don't sleep. They don't eat right. You know, there's lots of reasons why you could have bad vision. So he didn't think twice about it. But then he happened to, as he told the story, he happened to scratch his eye with his play card during a game, and so he had it checked out. And it was a scratched cornea, but then they also, when they went in there, they found the more serious issue of their detached retina. And so people who have had that know that it's a very tough and imprecise path back to full sight. When you get surgery, you're supposed to stay laying down, face down, and not lift your eyes up, and all these, you know, there's all these different things you're supposed to do, and you're incapacitated for a while you allow the surgery to take. And as a football coach, he wasn't about to do that, and so I don't know if he complicated it, but he's basically had 8 surgeries on the eye. The 8th, he revealed the 8th over the weekend at a charity event he had to try to get things right. And if all goes well, he's going to have something over 50% eyesight in that eye, and so that's the very brutal bottom line of where he's at with that. And there's also, as he's acknowledged, there's statistics that once it happens to one of your eyes, you're more likely to have it happen to your other eye, and so then he might have to deal with that at some point. And so it's a serious thing, and you know, whether you're a football coach or you're somebody who sits still all day long, it's very difficult to go through the proper rehab, and he has struggled with it, and it's taken 8 procedures to try to get it right.
He's a unique dude, right? He's very well liked. I mean, he feels like the type of kid that if he were recruiting my kid to play, I want my kid to play for Coach Zimmer, I think.
Yeah, he's a career-long assistant, and all the people who played for him and the people who covered for him and the people he worked for all loved him because he's very honest. When he'll tell you what he thinks, he doesn't beat around the bush. Everyone knows that he's had success as a defensive coach. So if you're a player and you listen to what he tells you to do, you'll get better. And that's especially on defense. And that's something that sounds simple, but it's not as frequent as you might think. And so people always like playing for him. When you become a head coach, though, it's a little different, and you have to be a little more political probably, and you have to choose your words a little more carefully and realize that your words will be interpreted differently as the head coach than it was as the defense coordinator. So I think he's gone through some growing pains in terms of the way he manages people and the way he deals with the room and all the things that are not X's and O's as a head coach. And so that is something probably all first-time head coaches go through, but they don't necessarily do it after 30 years of getting sort of your routine straight as a assistant coach. And so last year especially, there were some growing pains that went there, but I think he spent a good bit of the off season trying to work through that and talk to people about where things might have gone awry during their losing streak to end the year, and what he can do to make it better.
Well, Kevin, we're going to be you're going to get a cot for me out there near the Mall of America. First off, the Ravens play out there the third week of October. I'm sure the Orioles will be in the World Series or the ALCS by then as well. But and then we come back out there for Super Bowl this year. So certainly some trips. I had some people on earlier, and I'm going in and out of NFL conversation now with the Wizards and the Capitals being done, and the Orioles and the Preakness and all the other stuff. But I had somebody earlier in the week say, well, the Ravens have an easy schedule this year. All of the AFC Central, or North, I should say, the former Central, has an easy schedule because they're playing the NFC North, and that Chicago, Minnesota, Detroit, Green Bay, that's an easy schedule. Agree or disagree with that?
I don't know that I would agree with it. The one thing I would say for the Ravens is that the AFC North and the NFC North have a lot of similarities, and so it won't be like first of all, there won't be a ton of miles flown, so that their trips might be a little bit easier. But they're outdoor for the most part. There's Chicago and Green Bay especially. There's the outdoor games. There's the style of play, the mentality. There's some similarities there, and so in that regard, it won't be as though they'll be playing against teams which they're totally different from what they might be otherwise used to. And so
the Bears and the Browns both stink, too. You can add that. Yeah. And Green Bay and Pittsburgh, I think, are both clearly a cut above the rest of these teams, right?
Yeah. I think, I mean, Cleveland, they've made some improvements, but until they get a quarterback, they're still like a 3 or 4 win team, I would think. I mean, it's just too bad that they have not been able to find a quarterback that can match some of the other decent roster building that they've done. But in Chicago, who knows what's going to, I mean, they don't seem to all be on the same page. It's some incredible, just the week of the draft, just some crazy stuff that happened there. And so it's hard to imagine them being a really strong team as well.
We are chatting with Kevin Seifert. He is Seifert ESPN out on Twitter covering the National Football League. Any thoughts about the Ravens? And, I guess it was a quiet kind of draft for the Vikings because of the trade, right? When you don't pick on the first night, it's almost like you don't exist for a little while, and you don't feel like you've really built your team through the draft or have anything special you're looking for at training camp.
Yeah, the Vikings, they ended up having a draft party on the final day because they they didn't have a first-round pick, and they kept trading down. They ended up having 3 or 4 seventh-round picks. So their draft was was very quiet, except for Dalvin Cook, obviously the Florida State running back, who will be the heir apparent to Adrian Peterson if all goes well. That you look at the Ravens, and I think that they kind of went along for the defensive ride. I mean, you heard very much that this was a defensive draft heading into it, and they certainly, you look at the positions that the players that they picked early on, and that's certainly the direction they went in.
Hey, man, always great to catch up with you. You got anything you want to say about the Twins? Since I was looking for Twins guests and I saw Minnesota, I'm like, I haven't had Seifert on a while, man. I mean, I know this stuff's going on with Zimmer and Bridgewater. We play out there. I'm going to be living out there for 10 days. The place is all fired up about the Super Bowl, but, hey, Twins have been okay out of the gate, right? I mean, this is going to be a good series here with the Orioles the next couple days.
Yeah, it's weird because, not being there every day and just watching from afar, like my perception of them as a team going into the season was that they were not going to be very good, and that this was just not going to be a team that I mean, it'll be fun to go to an outdoor ballpark and watch them play over the summer in the nice weather in Minnesota, but this was not going to be a team that was going to be remotely competing for anything. And with a new general manager and the new front office and Paul Molitor staying over as the manager, you figured it was just a matter of time before he would have this year, and then they go through a managerial transition until the new guys could get the guy that they wanted in the manager's chair. And so there was really like zero expectations for this team. And I went to a game early on, and I remember looking at the lineup on the big scoreboard, and there was like 5 guys in the lineup batting under 200. And this was like 3 or 4 weeks into the season. They had this great defensive center fielder, Byron Buxton, who at the time I think was hitting .094.
I remember that.
And it was just just unbelievable numbers. Even whether this is the beginning of the year, it's more pitching than there is hitting, or whatever the trend might be. To have a major league lineup and have 5 guys hitting under 200 was just incredible. And it wasn't like this was the Sunday afternoon B team and everybody else would get the day off. These were the main guys, and it was just incredible. But the way that their division is and the way baseball is, you just can't write anybody off, I guess. And so they've managed to not fall out of the race this early, and I guess that's the best thing you can say. But I know there's a lot of people here who would just be stunned if they end up competing for that division title or the playoffs by the end of the year. It's not a team built to compete for this year, I don't think.
I tell people no finer place to sit and have a beer and one of those burgers where the bacon's inside the burger and the cheese and the craft brew.
Juicy Lucy, yeah.
But I tell you what, man, Target Field's a serious place. I tell people all the time, you want to go to a really cool ballpark, go spend a weekend in Minnesota. And, I mean, whatever week of summer you pick, whether it's like July or August, I mean, you need to go there when like the weather's good. But when the weather's good, that's a nice place to be, Minnesota.
Beautiful, yeah. It's beautiful views, and it's very accessible downtown, easy to get to, and it's a perfect ballpark for Minnesota. I thought it was dumb for them to build an outdoor park here when they built it, but it's just been great, and the teams have been bad, but they still draw because it's such a fun place to go hang out.
As long as Bert Blyleven circles me at some point, I'm going to be happy, man.
Go.
I can circle me, Bert.
Circle me, Bert.
Circle me, Bert.
Exactly.
Kevin Seifert joining us here. He is ESPN's national NFL writer, but covers the Vikings and covers the NFC North, or as I say, the Central. I still go back to my Pete Rozelle days. You can follow him at Seifert ESPN out on Twitter. Always great to visit with you, man. Keep enjoying the good life out there. Make sure you avoid those mosquitoes out there. I know it's a state bird.
Will do, Nestor. I appreciate it.
We'll see you soon. Kevin Seifert out in the Twin Cities doing all things Vikings. We're mixing up our football conversation around here. We still have room on our trips to Nashville, Green Bay, and London out at WNST.net under the Road Trips tab. And, of course, I am a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. If you miss anything, it's all in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. You can find that out there. Download the TuneIn radio app on your mobile device, and you can listen to WNST from wherever you are, anytime you want, and listen to what you want, when you want, where you want. It's how we do our podcast out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. Morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It is still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Hey, summertime, I don't need to tell you. Planet Fitness is around the corner. Go get yourself in shape. Last but never least, breaking news, and there's plenty of that with the Orioles bullpen situation, shuttling guys back and forth. And My God, I thought we were going to see Tyler Wilson again here and Mike Wright this week. I'm sure we will before it's all over with. You'll learn about it first on the WNST Tech Service. That is all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.